Hey Kentucky, this is Deidre Ransdell. Tonight the special session comes to an end with new pension legislation. Should Kentucky keep teachers from physically disciplining students? And UK basketball set to take on Texas Tech. All that and more next on Hey Kentucky. Welcome to Hey Kentucky, presented by Wendy's. I'm Deidre Ransdell. Josh Corman is my co-host tonight. Hey, Josh.
People tell me I have a face for radio. I think you're the expert on that. Is that, you don't have to answer the question, never mind.
Thank you very much. It's going to be controversial tonight. Lawmakers in Frankfort have passed the bill that gives local health departments, regional universities, and other agencies temporary relief from soaring pension costs. So today's 27-11 vote, followed by Governor Bevin's signing of the legislation, brought the special session to an end. Bevin's bill puts the brakes on a crushing 70% increase in already high payments that are so-called quasi-governmental agencies, and they're required to pay Kentucky's retirement systems. But the bill only offers relief for 1 year, and unlike legislation passed in March, Bevin's plan does not guarantee that employees of the affected groups can choose to retain their current traditional pension benefits until they retire. One top Democrat called it the beginning of the end for pensions.
If it's held that we can take people out of the retirement system based on all the things that have been said up here by the governor, by people in the legislature, there is a legitimate fear that that will be the plan going forward.
Some Republican lawmakers were among those who criticized the bill, which could still face legal challenges because of the fashion in which Bevin called the special session. Josh?
Yeah. I know Andy Beshear, which is surprising to no one, thinks that this could be the source of a lawsuit to come. It feels like, the good thing out of this is that those organizations you mentioned, which do important work like health departments, right, get a buffer. They get a year. But it's not over, right? The fight is going to come back on this, and there's going to have to be more conversation about what to do long term, and can you take people and just sort of remove them from that? Does that violate that inviolable contract? So still lots of questions, but for those organizations that were going to face those huge payments, this is definitely a relief in that year. I'm sure they'll be glad to have it.
And hopefully it'll keep them operational so they can make it through another year.
Yeah, because you're talking about places like domestic abuse shelters, right? And these are not places we want closing, and a lot of them had said, hey, we're going to have to close. If we have to pay this huge hike that started, I think, July 1st, we're not going to be able to stay open. Hopefully this prevents that.
Right. All right, next up, a new proposal in Kentucky would increase taxes on vaping products to match the taxes on tobacco products. The legislation then goes a step further and raises the tax rate for both of 15% to 27.5%. State Representative Jerry Miller, who's behind the effort, says he hopes this money would help the state's pension funding, although there's no language in the bill specifying that. Health leaders see this as a deterrent to keep young people from vaping or smoking, and students say it would work.
We don't have $50 in our pockets to go get new pods or new juice for our vape. So I think if we increase the taxes, they'll definitely be like, now what do I do? This is so important just so everyone has an idea or a glimpse of their long run. Like, you don't want to be sick. You want to be as healthy. You want to live. You have so much more that you can accomplish than getting addicted to something that's so small.
Health leaders say the higher prices could decrease the number of young people vaping, which has nearly doubled in the state from 2016 to 2018. The bill has been pre-filed for next year's General Assembly. If passed, the new tax rates could go into effect on July 31st of next year. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of good work both in this state and just as a nation in getting youth smoking rates down over the last couple of decades. That's been, a big deal, and it's worked, a lot of those efforts. Vaping has sort of allowed something that's, I guess, adjacent to smoking to come back. We still don't fully understand all of the potential health risks. The vaping is still sort of being evaluated and going through that phase. So it feels like if the tax is going to help, I'm not 100% sure she's right. Teens don't have a ton of money just lying around. But it feels like something that, if we don't get that under control, we're going to kind of undo all of those gains that we've done, to help get teen smoking down. It's just going to be replaced by a different vice, essentially.
And as I say to our children and their friends, you're putting something in your lungs that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, right. You're not
It's
just
not
walking
gonna
out
be
and breathing it. Yeah, long term, lots of questions.
Well, Josh, let's stay with politics. Legislation is once again being proposed to get rid of corporal punishment in Kentucky schools. Louisville Representative Jason Nemes is co-sponsoring the bill, saying that he didn't even realize teachers still had the authority to physically discipline students. Kentucky is one of 20 states where corporal punishment is still allowed. Although Nemes says he expects a bit of opposition, he feels it won't be enough to stop the bill from becoming a law. Josh, what is your take on this since you're a former teacher?
Yeah, and you're a former teacher as well, so we
Yeah.
can talk a little bit about this. It is surprising that you need a law. It feels like this is the sort of thing, right, that's sort of been phased out of schools. But, I'm sure that it's nice to have on the books to not be able to, paddle a student or whatever. I feel like this is one of those things where, like, as a culture, right, we all sort of assume that everything's gone away. But as soon as something happened, there was an incident in a school and it wasn't on the books, it wasn't technically illegal, does that open the door for something bad to happen to a student? So I'm glad that they're kind of, taking a look at this. I do wonder what opposition he expects to face, though. Does that not seem a little odd to you?
Well, there may be those parents who are looking for the school to teach their children everything. There may be those families that just are working too much, they don't have the time, and they want the school system to be the parental disciplinarian for their children as well. I can't imagine more than a handful of those in the Commonwealth, but it could happen and it could be out there. And there have been people who have wanted the school to step in more and help with their children who are a discipline problem.
Yeah, hopefully this avoids that help, including things like, paddling, spanking, whatever else would fit under the bill.
Exactly. In Washington, first responders injured after the 2001 terrorist attacks are one step closer to permanent compensation after numerous delays to secure the funding. Yesterday, the Senate passed a bill that will fund the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund through 2090. Kentucky's Rand Paul was one of the only 2 senators to vote against the legislation, renewing the objections he voiced last week.
Every bit of new spending, it doesn't matter whether it's a good cause, bad cause, or in-between cause. We need to not keep adding to the debt.
Despite the senator's concerns, the passage of the bill means the cost will be what is deemed necessary. The House passed the bill earlier this month, and President Trump is expected to sign it. Josh, we talked about the roadblocks for this funding by both Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell. What do you think?
I think this kind of worked out for Rand Paul. I talked about last week, he knew this was going to pass. He knew that there was broad bipartisan support, but he got to stand on his tree stump of responsible spending, I guess, and kind of, get the attention that he likes in that way because he loves being, fiscal conservative. It's just like, of all the things, we talked about this last week, of all the things, the hills to die on, why raise this objection when other things that have added to the debt that he's just, ranted about not wanting to add to? Where was the opposition to that? This just feels like a weird thing to pick to hammer on for him.
Right. And he's not won any friends over by fighting against this one.
Yeah, this is not the bill. It just doesn't seem like if you want to come off looking like a stand-up guy that you oppose.
Exactly. All right, let's move on now. A little bit lighter subject and one near and dear to our hearts, UK basketball. Yesterday we talked about the non-conference schedule minus the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Well, after our taping, we learned that the matchup has also been locked up. And the Wildcats are going to head to Lubbock, Texas to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders next January. Get your guns up. While there have been whispers that the national runner-up was a possibility, the general consensus was that Kentucky would be taking on Kansas on the road since the Jayhawks traveled to Rupp Arena this past year in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Josh, what do you think?
I have a little bit of trouble getting super excited about this. I know that they were just in the national title game, but their roster next year is not going to look like the one that just went to the national title game. The Big 12 is Kansas, just like the SEC is Kentucky as far as basketball is concerned. And not having them on the schedule either in the Champions Classic or in the Big 12 SEC Challenge feels like a little bit of a letdown. It really does.
You want to take on the Jayhawks?
Yeah, we're Kentucky. If we're going to play somebody in another conference, let's go big or go home. And no disrespect to Texas Tech, just came off a great season. I think they might not be quite that same juggernaut this year.
Well, there you go. Up next on Hey Kentucky, you may call it theater for those with short attention spans. The new Circle Circular learns about a 10-minute play festival going on this weekend here in Lexington. Stay with us.